An ancient 2 billion-year-old nuclear reactor discovered in Africa. 2 billion years old. Now, we have recent evidence of ancient civilizations' nuclear wars. We have images of strange-looking bombs and cloud-like explosions from the Sumerian tablets and the Sumerian temples, which means that at that time they knew of this type of atomic power, and perhaps they were trying to record the fact that it was used. Now, were they referring to what happened in their area or their past, or were they referring to something that happened in Africa or in India? And when we look at Google Earth, Northern Africa, the expanse of desert where it was once thought that it was lush tropical vegetation, something like we have in the Amazon, people ask, what happened? Why did all this disappear all of a sudden? And when we look at Google Earth, we see that the whole expanse of that wave going horizontally from Africa into India, something happened there. And this atomic blast has created strange glass, which is found in nuclear explosions. This is a trinitite glass, and it forms around the dark areas, radiating spikes around ground zero of these atomic blasts. Evidence of ancient civilization nuclear wars has been found. Recent concerns over the threat of possible a new World War III using nuclear weapons, one has to wonder if we were once again repeating errors of not only our past, but the blunders of ancient civilizations that came before us. And evidence supports that our current weapons of mass destruction are very similar to weapon technology that may have caused some of the past civilization mysterious disappearances. Now, something very strange has happened here. The 2 billion-year-old nuclear reactor discovered in Africa. It was widely believed that the origin of the Earth was about 4.6 billion years ago. Then about 1 billion years later, life started to form, and from there, multicellular life evolved. Then eventually modern humans started to populate the planet, they say about 200,000 years ago. If we're wondering where the 4.6 billion years came from, scientists arrived at the number by finding the oldest piece of the planet they can, and then figuring out how old that piece is. Of course, this involves actually finding the oldest piece of the planet, which is no simple matter, since the Earth is always breaking down rocks into magma and pushing it back up to the surface as new rock. So what if we consider for a minute that our dating technique is not foolproof? Maybe we did not find the oldest piece of the planet after all, or perhaps radiocarbon dating is not as reliable as we think it is, or we'd like it to be. And what if the Earth is much, much older than we previously thought? So if we look around, there are clues to be found all around the world, from the Great Pyramids of Egypt to the Sacsayhuaman ruins in Peru, that point to the possibility that advanced prehistoric civilizations may have existed on this planet tens of thousands or even millions of years ago. And in this article, we'll talk about one of the intriguing finds, this ancient nuclear reactor. It happened in May of 1972. Workers were at the nuclear fuel processing plant in France. They found that ore sourced from a mine in the Oklo deposit in Gabon in Africa that was formed over 2 billion years ago, had over 440 pounds of uranium-235 that appeared to be missing. This was scary because that much uranium could make at least 6 nuclear bombs. After scratching their heads for weeks, researchers at the French Atomic Energy Commission, the CEA, came to the conclusion that the missing uranium must have gone through a nuclear fission and split into other atoms, which was extremely unlikely, as this would require some very specific conditions. The first being the size of the uranium deposit needs to exceed the length that fission-induced neutrons travel. The second is that there needs to be a lot of uranium-235. And thirdly, there needs to be a substance that can slow the neutrons that is released when uranium nucleus split. And finally, there cannot be too much boron, lithium, or anything else that absorbs neutrons. Although this seems highly unlikely to occur naturally, the conclusion was that, well, it just did it, because there was really no other possible explanations for it. Now, there is an alternative theory. Scientists who were sent to investigate the site concluded that this nuclear reactor came into being 1.8 billion years ago and was operational for about 500,000 years. The results of the research were made public at a conference of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and although many labeled the finding wondrous but naturally occurring, others concluded that this setup could not have occurred naturally, and therefore this setup must have been man-made. Man-made ancient nuclear reactor. The case for the reactor not formed naturally was made by researchers who found enriched minerals at the site, which would indicate that the reactor was produced, and water was also found to have been used to moderate the reaction, as we use water today in nuclear reactors. These findings were puzzling, because it is not possible for natural uranium to go critical except under very special circumstances, such as the presence of graphite or heavy water as a moderator, neither of which could reasonably be expected to have been present in the vicinity of Oklo. In his book, Secrets of the Lost Races, author René Neuberger says, following the publication of Dr. Perrin's report by the French Academy of Sciences, however, questions concerning his conclusions were raised by many experts. Glenn T. Seaborg, former head of the United States Atomic Energy Commission and Nobel Prize winner for his work in the synthesis of heavy elements, pointed out that for uranium to burn, quote unquote, for uranium to burn in a reaction, conditions must be exactly right. This water must be extremely pure. Even a few parts per million of any contaminant will poison the reaction, bringing it to a halt. The problem is that no water that pure exists naturally anywhere in the world. Another objection to the theory of a naturally formed nuclear reactor is because several researchers noted that there is no time in history at the site where the uranium ore would be rich enough in uranium-235 for a reaction to take place naturally. But because a reaction did take place, that means the uranium was far richer than what could have formed naturally. Also, what's surprising is that for a massive nuclear reactor like this, the impact on the environment around it should have been devastation, but instead it was only limited to around 130 feet on all sides, and the nuclear waste was held in place because of the geological shape of the site, which again may have occurred naturally, but to many researchers this seems more like it was designed, man-made, that is. So was this ancient reactor just a natural marvel, as many publications claim, or could it have been constructed by a bygone civilization millions of years ago? I think it was man-made millions of years ago. So we have a lot more to research and find conclusions to. Who was here doing all this? Amazing. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, You will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.